Hello everyone and welcome back to GoodKnit Kisses. I'm your host today, Kristen, and I am looking at a picture of Harry Styles today because earlier in 2020 he was featured on the Today Show wearing this cardigan here, and it has just hit super trendy online. If you don't know who Harry Styles is, he was part of One Direction, if you're familiar with them, and then branched out as a solo artist, and he has a very different style, and he is a trendsetter for people. And my daughter, when I asked my daughter about this cardigan, I asked her about him. She's not a Harry, as they would put it, but I had told her about it because on my channel I've had a lot of people wanting to make this particular sweater or cardigan. And so today I wanted to bring to you the last of our Houndstooth, because this was inspired by one part of this cardigan, which is called a Jacquard. And the Houndstooth pattern is really nice because it makes the Jacquard a little bit easier. It's a 7-row repeat on this pattern here, and the way that the pattern runs, it's just easier to make it like a Houndstooth. And so several people have been trying to crochet up a design to look like this, and so I had started this whole thing off a couple weeks ago with, if you're watching me on the replay, thank you so much. If you're watching me live, yay, and you can ask me questions, but the replay, all the dates won't make sense. It doesn't really matter, but Crochet started this whole thing off and clued me into this patchwork sweater. So anyway, this is the crocheted Houndstooth version, and then this is the Loom knit version, which looks just like the knit version right here. So this is the needle version. Sorry, I've got extra yarn here. So we have 3 different ones. They're all the same look for Houndstooth. Anyway, so this inspired it. So I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm not usually like jump on the trends. I want to stick with a lot of basics and also teach you some other and bring you into some intermediate stuff. But what's cool about this is it's getting a lot of people. My daughter said mainly like junior high, high school, college, mostly girls making this, yay, which is great because it's the new generation of knitting and crochet peeps, okay? And I love when we have something that gets us excited and they're going to wear it, which is great. So good morning to you. If you're just hopping on live, if you're on the replay, be sure and tell me where you're from. So we've got Cheryl. Hey, Cheryl. Hi, Carol. Ann. And we've got Christy. Good morning. How are you? Hey, Mary Lou. Good morning, Lori. Yes, looks like colors of patchwork. Absolutely. Sharon says, I can't believe I woke up on time after staying up all night. Girl, me too. Me too. I am always up late, even if I have a broadcast in the morning. All right, I should learn my lesson, but we don't, right? Let me get a little bit to drink. Okay, so today what I want to do is I want to let you first know next week on my live broadcast on Friday, it's going to be pretty short. We're going to do a little bit of a broadcast, and then if you'll tune in the very next day on Saturday, is that the 11th or 12th, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, that is going to be me walking through live for people for needle knit and crochet and learning how to read this pattern. It'll be set up a little bit different and it'll be easier to see from there, but this is how I have to do it for Facebook Live. So, and I'll probably put this replay on YouTube. So hi, YouTube peeps later on. So, the overview of today's video is I wanted to tell you, first of all, the Houndstooth pattern for loom knitting is out tomorrow on Saturday, and then you'll be able to refer to that if you make this cardigan. So for loom knitters, I want to go over conversions in the pattern here. Next week, I'm going to go live on YouTube at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on Saturday. I normally post my videos at 7 a.m. on Saturdays, but I want to join you live, and that way if people want to ask me questions, they can. If they don't, I'll just keep prattling through, and I'm going to go over the pattern similar to what I'm doing today, except it'll probably be more polished because today I haven't done this yet, and then I'll be doing both in a live format. So we're going to be going through here, and I'll be talking about, let's see, how am I going to scroll? I don't know why it's not scrolling up. There we go. We're going to go over this pattern because it's very differently written and everything, and I wanted y'all to see what it was. Now, first of all, J.W. Anderson, the designer of this cardigan, sells this cardigan on his website. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his first name, but their team generously gave the pattern for this, seeing all the crazy rage of fun and all the ladies all the Harrys who wanted to make a cardigan. And so they are all they were all trying to make theirs on their own, and so he decided to put this PDF out so you can go on their website, and I can give y'all links later on. But this is the title of the PDF is, if you happen to be looking for it, it's J.W. Anderson, all one word, and then it's color block, but color with the U on it, patchwork cardigan PDF. Now, first to keep in mind, this is a UK, I believe this pattern is written, I said that funny, I believe, I believe this pattern is written in the UK, so there are some terminology things that you may not be familiar with, and some of them I'm not familiar with. There's one abbreviation, but it doesn't matter, that I'm a little like, what does that mean? So someone in the UK who's joining us today might be able to clarify, which is great. So anyway, yeah, Cheryl, yes. It says, are you saying we will be able to make that cardigan? Yes, you will. But am I saying I'm going to make it? No, I am not. So what I want to teach you is all these different stitches. Do you see here? This is actually a knit sweater. Okay. It's not crochet. However, crocheters are the ones who kind of alerted me to this. What the crocheters are doing is really creative, which crocheters tend to get creative and just figure out things. They're making patchwork squares all in the right colors, but they're not necessarily doing the same stitches. First of all, they're doing crochet, and a lot of them are just doing a single crochet. I would choose a half double if I was doing crochet, but that's okay. And then there's this one piece that I'm going to show you in a moment. That's the Jacquard pattern, and it is red and black. Now, I did mine in navy and black. Personally, I actually like navy better with this, but because there's some blues in here. I mean, not that it has to match, because clearly it doesn't, but I didn't have any black on hand and the weight that I needed. So let's go through this thing. Let me see if I've got another question before I start. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so J.W. Anderson, this is the Harry Styles cardigan, and it is knit. And when we scroll up on our pattern, you can see first of all, there's always two columns. You always want to look at everything on the left first, like this whole left side first, and then jump up to the top right, okay? So let's just kind of go through it. Thank you so much to J.W. Anderson for putting this out. If you'd like to purchase one, by the way, you can get one for about $1,500 on their website. So, and then they have lots of other things as well. This striking patchwork cardigan will introduce a relative newcomer to various hand knitting stitches, and we're going to do some loom knitting, y'all. I'm going to talk y'all through the loom knitting conversion, and then we'll talk about needle and crochet the following week. Anyway, so from simple garter stitch through lovely textured moss stitches to a color stranded technique featuring a houndstooth pattern. Now, first of all, here's our first clue. It says a houndstooth pattern. Okay, houndstooth and Jacquard are mentioned in this pattern. They're talking about the same thing, so someone might find that a little bit confusing, but houndstooth and Jacquard are very similar. They're both a Fair Isle technique. More on that in the specific Fair Isle videos for the houndstooth. And so I talk about what Fair Isle is, and holding your strands in the back so you don't have these long strands. Anyway, these 3 videos are available. Crochets 2 weeks ago we did, and then the needle version is last week, and then the loom version comes out tomorrow. Let's see, it's knitted in manageable pieces, which are then sewn together, which makes a great project for a knit in the park. Okay, so speaking to that, you could work all your little stripes. These are worked in stripes, okay, or panels, little like a strip up here. And yes, you could take that to the park and work on that, or take it wherever. But you wouldn't want to be hauling around your whole sweater, all the squares with you. But that's what's great about patchwork. You can make them in individual squares, which is what crocheters are doing. So you could do that. It just means you have more seams. With knitting and on needles or the loom, you can continue to do one after the other, but you can also do that in crochet, and I would recommend that for someone doing crochet. But sometimes people want to patchwork it through. Whatever you choose, it's okay. It's all up to you. You do not have to do anything, and that's the beauty of knit or crochet. And that's also the beauty of this sweater, which is really random. And it also has construction methods where it's kind of like this deconstructed, reconstructed look. There's little bitty, let's see if you can see the picture on Harry. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's these little bitty pieces and strands. And if I zoom in here, you can see these little tiny little things sticking out here. He's basically like, if you ever seen a patchwork quilt, like an old one, my great grandmother had one where she just ties the pieces together, a piece of yarn together in a square knot and just leaves the edges to fray. He calls them tassels, small tassels. They're not tassels, they're just a square knot of yarn. That's all they are. So be not intimidated. And you can choose not to. If you like finished things like I do, you might choose to hide that. All right, so skills, beginner, intermediate. The reason why they say intermediate is because there are some buttons involved in here. There's some seaming involved in here, and the pattern really doesn't spell out some of that intricately. And they do have a video on what they mean, but a lot of it is shot from far away. And but there are some very helpful tutorials out there that several of the girls who are making them have done. So I want to try and kind of aid along anybody who's just trying to read over the pattern. So it's one size. The sizes are here. They're all in centimeters, so you'll have to convert. Or I would just recommend getting a tape measure where you can flip it over, and one side has your inches and one side has your centimeters, and just measure it in centimeters, and don't worry about converting things like that, unless it's easier for you to do your math, and you can do that converting, flip back and forth if you want. Okay, so the flat body length is 84 centimeters. The total length is 60 centimeters. And the sleeve length is 48 centimeters. From where to where that they're measuring, I couldn't really fully tell you, but you can take the links that they spell out later on in the panels to be able to add up the numbers and know what that overall dimension is. You can add to those numbers and make them larger if you want to. So. Good morning to everybody who's jumping on. We are working on the Harry Styles cardigan, and I am showing you conversions for putting it on the knitting loom if you want, and next week we'll be going over the needle version and crochet and walking through the pattern. So your tension measures 18 stitches and 14 centimeters. So when they're saying it like that, they mean 18 across. And that's 14 centimeters using 8mm needles and super chunky yarn. That is a super bulky 6-weight yarn. I happen to be using a yarn that really honestly got discontinued, but I have all the colors for it. But you can use 3 strands like this. This is 3 strands held together of a worsted weight yarn. This is kind of on the light side of worsted weight, but it's still a number 4. And I am pulling 3 strands from one ball. Okay. This is a Navajo plying technique. I think I said that right. So I'm pulling these strands from this one ball. If you want a video on that, I do have a link, and I can give it to you later on how to do it, but you can see what that looks like right here. This is one of the stitches in the pattern, and I'm still knitting my sample up. I fell asleep, so I didn't finish the sample, but I did work all of my other samples in the super bulky weight 6 yarn, and then what I was going to do is measure them out to see how many stitches wide that I wanted to make them, so that I can get them the right size. That, or you can leave them wider and you just make a much bigger size for you, which for me, I would have to. I am not making it. I've already made 2 sweaters this year and I've got other projects to do, but I want you guys to be able to make it if you want to. So Navajo plying technique, I have a video. I'm showing it using a crochet hook, but you can do it for any of the tools. So I suggest, first of all, before I get too far deep in here, if you're not turned off by the sweater, or you are turned off by the sweater, that's okay. I challenge you to pick this up and work through the stitches and make your own samples, learning the different stitches. I think it would be really fun, and I believe learning them will be a good challenge for you. They're not really challenging, and you might pick up a new favorite. Like, I'm just pausing for a minute because while we're in the beginning and I don't want to lose everybody, this is a really fun one. This is the, make sure I've got it turned up the right way. This is the reverse B stitch. So I actually really like the back, which looks like this. So these are knits and purls and knit one below. So for the loom knitter, you're going to be purling one below. And if you worked on a sweater, or you are working on the sweater that we just did previously, the easygoing loom knit sweater, you can see how you'd be able to set up working on that just like I did in the textured stitch pattern. It's very similar, but you have to do some offsetting. So it's kind of taking that one up a level. Do you see how that looks? And like I said, I really love the reverse too. It's got a cool look to it. Anyway, all right. So, and we have the link. So thank you so much to Joanne at GoodKnit Kisses. She has got our link for us for pulling 3 strands of yarn from one ball with a Navajo plying technique. Okay, so materials, onto the yarn, super chunky weight or super bulky weight, 6, based quantities based on 90 meter length per 100 gram. That's you know, an average ball weight is 100 grams. So, and they have 90 meters on them on average. And so the quantities are 4 times 100 gram balls in red. So if you're trying to figure out how many that is, 90 meters, and you want to figure out yards, see how many yards that is in meters, and you can say that you need 4 times, or whatever number this is, times however many yards that is, and then you will know and divide that up by your ball size to get how many balls you actually need. Let me say that one more time. Multiply how many balls, the 4 times, you can actually do it this way. You can say 4 balls that are 90 meters equals that really large number. Convert that number to yards, or leave it at meters, and divide it up by however many are in the ball that you are purchasing for your color. Okay, and do that for each of the individual colors, because some colors might have more or less in them. So 4 balls of red, 4 balls of black, 3 balls of orange, 3, that's burnt orange, doesn't really matter, but 3 balls of yellow, 3 balls of green, and 1 ball of blue. And then we have Aran weight yarn, which is 3 100 gram balls of red. Aran weight yarn is like is your worsted weight, or even a sport weight yarn. So it's going to be on the lighter side, and you're using that one for the cuff and edging here, the bottom and the cuff, and I believe the collar. Yeah, there's a collar on here. That's what that's for. And then the blue up here is for there's a button band that goes up. And then 6 black buttons, 2 centimeter round black buttons. A pair of 8 millimeter knitting needles for the patchwork, which is a US 11 size. And so that's for all the squares. And then you need a pair of 5.5 millimeter, I forget what US number that is, knitting needles for the button and buttonhole bands. Okay. Yeah. And then let's move on. So that is, oh, I'm sorry. And then a set of chunky knitter's pins and a knitter's needle for sewing seams. So, I don't know what they mean by chunky knitter's pins, but I think they mean a tapestry needle, so a wide-eyed tapestry needle, and then you need a regular embroidery needle, just a standard darning needle to go through the buttonholes for the button band, so that, and also for sewing on the seams. Now, it does say, excuse me, it says for sewing seams. Okay, so if you go to their website, when you download this, there is a video and they show crocheting the seams together in several places. So you can have a hook and yarn and do a quick type of method of crocheting the seams together with a contrasting yarn and really make that stand out. And you'll see that in other pictures when you start looking at this sweater online. Okay, so this one here is, yeah, the reverse V-stitch. You love that, Christy? So, oh, hold on. Let me get a drink here. Christy says something. I want to point this out because Christy's got a great comment. There is a lady who did what you said. Okay, so Christy on here, if you can't see your comment, it says, this would be cute as a textured sampler sweater in one color. The original reminds me a bit too much of crazy sweaters we wore in the 80s. Yeah, hashtag do not need to go back. Absolutely, Christy. Actually, there was a girl who did, a young lady, I don't know her age, doesn't matter, but she did, I believe it was like tonally in different blues and cream, I want to say. So she did her own take on this, and it was actually really pretty. I really love how she did it. So you don't have to do this way. You can make it your own. You could change up where you want these squares. Draw yourself a little grid with a graph piece of paper, or just make your own grid out. Okay. And then you could like label which ones you'll see later on here. Okay. So we have, for abbreviations, we've got knit and purl. Mainly the stitches you need is to know how to knit and purl. STS or ST is stitches, RS is right side, WS is wrong side. So for the loom knitters, anything that's on the WS or wrong side, you're going to do the opposite stitch, but some of these don't say it, and we'll see that later on. REP is repeat, REM is remaining, then you have ST for stocking stitch. Knit a row, purl a row, that's like knitting on the front side and then on the wrong side. So knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side. It's really funny they said this because they use the term stocking stitch here, but like I said, we're in the UK, and so later on they use a term called jersey. So apparently jersey, which makes sense because like a t-shirt is honestly small tiny stockinette stitches. They're just tiny V's, and some people call those like a T-jersey, a jersey shirt, which is just a stockinette. So we're going to be doing something called a slipped, I want to say it's a jersey slip or slipped jersey. So stocking stitch or stockinette or jersey all mean the same thing, okay, except for the one that slipped, but it's just a slight version of it. It looks like this. Okay, so this is the one that has the slipped part. You can tell because the back it has these little lines, and I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it gives just a little bit of movement in the stitch, but it mostly looks like just a regular stockinette. But I don't know if you can tell, but there's kind of a little bit of a dip, and you can see some shadow where it just creates just a slight texture. Okay. And then WFWD or YFWD is bring yarn forward between the needles to front of work. Then we have knit two together. We have knit one below, and then we have slip one. Generally, when you're slipping as if to purl. If you're slipping on the knitting loom, you're just holding the yarn in the back, and you don't move that stitch. That's the cool part about the knitting loom. And it's not bringing the yarn in the front, so you don't have to like pick up the stitch and put the yarn there and then replace it or anything else like that. So, all right, so here's our overall of the sweater front and the sweater back all finished. So, overview, all stitch patterns are worked over 18 stitches. At the beginning of a panel, cast on 18 stitches. When the square measures 14 centimeters in length, follow the charts for the next stitch pattern to form panel. There are some simple shoulder and neck shaping at the top of the panels for the back and fronts. The panels are sewn together to create the garment piece. So you're basically working these in stripes. Okay, you call them a panel, but they're just like you would start, and you don't do this bottom band. Okay, so you kind of, this band is put on later on. Okay, this ribbing look here. Okay, so you would say on this one, you would start with the green, and then you'd have yellow, and then you'd have this old checkerboard, and then you would have orange. Then the next panel you would do, you got red, checkerboard, which is our houndstooth, and we have our yellow, and we have our red again. And continue on and on. Okay, this is the part where I don't know what this term is. NB, it's not in abbreviations. Leave 8 cm tails throughout when you cast on and change color. Do not darn, but follow instructions to make up section to form small tassels. And that's that part I was talking about in the beginning. You're just tying it in a knot and leaving it to fray or whatever. So yeah, that's what you do. And that is the whole first page, or official second page of the pattern. This page is the one I want you to draw attention to, so we'll spend more time on this one. Stitching squares. You're going to be working these patterns together to form your panels. So when you want to form a black one, I have something to say about that too. If you want to form this black one, it's a moss stitch. So row 1 is knit 1, purl 1, and you repeat to the end. Well, row 2, it doesn't specify if it's a right side or wrong side. So I'll show you why I think that row 1 is always right side and row 2 is wrong side, because when you come way down here to the reverse V stitch, row 1 is right side knit, and then row 2 doesn't specify. So that means that all of the odd numbers are right side and all the evens are wrong side. So convert the even rows. So if you're loom knitting, this purl 1 knit 1 becomes knit 1 purl 1. Okay, so you're casting on an even number of stitches. So if you don't get 14 centimeters across in 18 stitches, then you can change it up to what it is. So I would just make a sample to see which one will be what you'll get. One keynote: the loom knit version, instead of the Jacquard that you'll see here in a moment at the bottom, this houndstooth needs to be a 4-row repeat. It's going to be the same thing for needles. So it either needs to be 16 stitches or 20 stitches. It's probably going to be 16 after doing this one. This one's just a little bit wide, or a lot wide, so I would have done this at 16 stitches to cast on. So I would start with 16 on these and see if you get your 14. It also depends upon the yarn that you have and the loom. I'm using a 5/8 loom. Okay, so this is 5/8 center peg to center peg measurement. This is a flexi loom from Knitting Board, and we can drop a link how to get that. I've got them on my Amazon store. You can get them at kvlooms.com. Yeah, so, and then you can get them in a few other stores. Okay, so this pattern is a simple moss stitch. Let's just look at this for now. It's really hard to see, I know. This is what the moss stitch looks like, and I did it in blue, hoping you can see it a little bit more. But this is, do you see that how nubby it is? So this is what the moss stitch looks like, and I haven't cleaned up my sample at all and woven in the piece. Okay, now I'm holding it right side up. It doesn't really matter, but it's just an offset, nice little nubby texture. So you get the feel of the texture more, but can you see how if you wanted to do this in any stitch, you could? Or you could make all of these in the moss stitch. So if you decide you don't want to do all of them like this, and you don't want to do it in a garter stitch, which is actually the orange panel like this. This is just a standard garter stitch, knit across, purl across, for loom knitters, or all knits for needle knitters. You could just do everything in the moss, which I think is always a lovely design. Okay, moving on. I think y'all got that one. Then the yellow one is the double moss stitch. All right, so what happens is rows 1 and 2, you're going to knit and purl and repeat to the end. But you can't do that on the knitting loom. You have to change it up on row 2. So row 1 is knit and purl, but row 2 is going to have to be purl then knit. Okay, so you switch that up. So this is written opposite. So you would use, so if you printed this off, what you could do is write rows 1 and 3 are this, and rows 2 and 4 are this, because it's already flipped it to the right way. Does that make sense? All right, and then you're going to repeat that, that 4-row repeat for 14 centimeters, and then you change to the next color. So let's look at this one. That's the one that I pulled 3 strands from this one. Now this is on needles, but I want you to see what it looks like. Keeping in mind, this is not a super bulky 6-weight yarn, it's 3 strands together. So do you see how you have 2 knit stitches lined up, and then you have 2 purl stitches lined up, and then 2 knit, 2 purl, and then above it, it's offset. So where you have 2 knits above those 2 purls from the row before, and then that repeat of 4 rows gets repeated again and again and again. It has this really beautiful stitch. It's a nice stretchy stitch. Feels really good. So this is a sampler pattern. Absolutely, you can do whatever you want on this. It's kind of like making an afghan. You could even make this just as a blanket. Call it your Harry Styles blanket. I don't know. So if you don't feel like making the cardigan, you can make this in whatever colors and make yourself a little sampler for the fall. Something for while you're watching Netflix. So what's not to love about moss stitch? Christy says, and I also say that about this one, the double moss is also beautiful. So moss and double moss, you could even alternate between those two. That would be lovely. And then we've already covered the garter stitch right here. So let's look at the actual pattern. Moss stitch, down here, burnt orange, garter stitch. It says knit every row for 14 centimeters, then change to the next stitch or follow directions, blah, blah, blah. So for loom knitters, you knit a row and then you purl a row. Knit a row, purl a row. Again, we're converting that wrong side row. Reverse B-stitch. This one is super cute. It is worth learning, and if it's all you get out of this, then do it. And well, and I would say the Houndstooth, because it comes out tomorrow. So this one's a little bit more work. If, like I said earlier, if you had done the textured stitch in the Loom pattern, excuse me, I had to get some water. If you did the textured stitch in the easygoing Loom knit hat or easygoing sweater, you would see working purl 1 below. In this pattern, it says knit 1 below. That's because it's worked on the wrong side as a knit 1 below. So on loom knitters, you're going to be purling 1 below. In order to get that purl 1 below, the stitch before on the other row, on the row before, you need to not knit that stitch. So you just put the yarn in front of the peg. Well, you leave the yarn on the peg. Like, so if you were going to flat knit, but you didn't actually knit it, well, or you knit wrap, so we kind of give ourselves a little bit more room when you wrap around and kind of prepare. Again, go see the videos for that so you can see it. So row 1, you knit across, and because you end on the first row, you're going to begin with a knit 1 below. So because of that, then you begin this knit row like you end this one. See how last 2 stitches, I know I'm saying this really funny. I'm gonna have to say this better next week. Let me start over. So you look at row 2 and prep for row 2. So the ending of row 2 has 2 stitches or knit. So on row 1, you'll knit the first 2 stitches, and then the 3rd stitch, you'll prepare and leave the yarn above. So, like, let me go down here. So you would knit these 2 stitches. I know this is the wrong sample on here. And then you would act like you're going to knit this stitch and leave a stitch here, and then knit this one, and then leave a stitch here, like holding up in front, and then knit this one. So you're preparing all the way down to the end. And then when you get down to the end here, this one should have the stitch prepared to purl 1 below, and then this one should be knit. So then when you work your row 2, it'll all be knit, it'll all be available to you to do it the right way. So then you would purl the first stitch because you're doing the reverse stitch for converting. So row 2, purl 1 below, repeat, purl 1 below, purl 1 below until the last 2 stitches, and then you're actually purling those 2 stitches just on that row. Row 3, now you have to shift it. So let's look over here. Green sample is the reverse B stitch, and I've pinned the right side. Let me make sure I am, yeah, okay. Making sure I'm turned the right way. So this is the front, so you can see how this stitch here, see how there's two purl bumps right on top of each other. This is where it gets on the loom where it's purl 1 below, okay? And then you have purl 1 below. The next row shifts that over like this. So when you begin this row 3, you shift it. So you begin with knitting the first stitch and then preparing the second one, and then do that all the way until the end, and then the last 2 stitches are knit. Okay, does that make sense? And then row 4, you just do the opposite. You purl 2, and then purl 1 below, and then purl 1. So just keep going back between purl 1 below and purl 1. And then repeat that until you have 14 centimeters. Can you show that set up on the stitch? Yeah, you know what? Let's just do that. So if this project is, I'm not using this right now, but let's say I know I have 2 colors here, but let's just do one. We'll do it with the cream because you can see it easier. So let's say I need to work 2 stitches my row before. I would do, this is row 1 where I've got 2 knits, and then I've got the one where I'm preparing it. So I can, let me do this. This is gonna be easier for me. So I'm gonna prepare this, and what I do is I hold it back with my loom, and then I go ahead and, sorry, I wasn't ready to do this. Okay, go around, hold it to get the tension, and then go ahead and work this next stitch, knitting, and then I'll prepare this one. I'm holding it in the back to give it a little bit more space, a little bit more looseness on my stitch, and that improves the tension for the next row. And then knit this one. So see how it's loose? Okay. And so every other one is set up for the next row. It makes the actual harder row, next row, easier because you've already prepared it, and then you just purl across everything. And you don't have to think about what you have to do on those even rows because you already did it on the odd row. Does that make sense? All right, so that sample was for my houndstooth. It was set up to do this one, so that's why I have multiple colors on that one. All right, then we have, sorry, hold on, got my little alert. Okay, similar to the sweater. Yes, Cheryl, similar to the sweater. Then, okay. The next one is the jersey slip stitch. Okay, so this one is a stockinette. This is what I was talking about earlier. It's not stocking stitch, it's not stockinette, it's jersey. That's, honestly, it's all the same thing. So a jersey is a stockinette, all knit stitches on the right side. But they're throwing in something different. You don't have to do this. I'm going to show you what it looks like again, but all you're doing is you're knitting a row. Then you knit another row for the loom knitters because it says purl here. Row 3, you're going to add in slipping a stitch. So you knit a stitch and then skip a stitch where you leave the yarn in the back. So you would, let's say I just knit my stitch. I'm going to slip this one by just going in the back. So then I'm going to do this one and knit it. And then I'm going to go skip one, knit one, skip one, knit one. So it works that row faster for you if you want to do that. Just make sure you're not pulling too super tight here, but it does work with the tightness because let's look at my sample here. If I flip it on the reverse, see all those slip stitches? And because they pull slightly inward, it makes this pucker a little bit. And it's not a seersucker, but can you see it changes the texture of this a little bit? Let me stretch it. I'm not sure what translates on Facebook because the quality of the video isn't quite as there as on my normal tutorial, but you can see how it changes it a little bit. And then the fourth row is just working back again in a knit stitch. So for loom knitters, it's real easy. All these rows are knit. It's just that row 3, or every 4 rows, technically, because you're repeating these 4 rows, is slipped. Okay, every other stitch. So repeat. Oh, and see, I can see how I made a mistake. So it says repeat rows 3 and 4 until section measures 19 centimeters or 14 centimeters. Actually, you can see I did that wrong. So I didn't even read my directions right. I've got to make this sample again. So I did it every 4 rows, but technically it's supposed to be every other row is with the slip stitch. So rows 1 and 2 are not repeated. So see, I made a mistake. I'm gonna have to make my sample over again. But yeah, so you're just keep working those repeated rows 3 and 4 until the section measures 14 centimeters. Then the last one, there's the beauty. This is the red black Jacquard. And it doesn't say Houndstooth here, but it said Houndstooth in the very beginning of the pattern. So this says repeat rows 1 through 7 from chart for 14 centimeters, work in stocking stitch using stranded color method. That means you're knitting a row and purling a row, okay? Or stocking knit, as we would say in America. So you've got black and red. You start with the red, you work with the black, you start on row 1 and you work your way from right to left all the way down, working knit stitches and just pulling the color that you need. Number 2, row 2, you go up and then you work them all the way across. You keep going back and forth and then you end row 7 all the way over here. Couple of choices here. There is no explanation of what to do here. What they hint at on the video for J.W. Anderson is now you just start working everything in the opposite direction. And instead of starting on the right side over here on the chart, you actually start on the left side and work the pattern this way. All right. You can choose to do that if you want to. I did see another girl who did the Harry Styles sweater. I'm trying to remember the name of her channel. She did this and I actually liked hers better because it's really hard to say reverse how your brain thinks about all these patterns just for another row, the way that charts work, and go everything backwards the next 7 rows and then switch back again those 7 rows after. What she did was she went ahead and just worked 1 row back. I believe it was purling that row and just red, and then she started again. So if you want to do that, go for it. If you want something simpler, you can do the Houndstooth that comes out tomorrow. So that pattern on the knitting loom, I did that on the channel, and that'll come out tomorrow. And I'm actually showing you how to hold all your strands in the back so that you have no long strands of yarn, and it's just a 4-row repeat. The Houndstooth pattern does not work on an even stitch number. It doesn't work as a multiple 2. It has to be a multiple of 4. So you would need to do 20 stitches or 16 stitches. Okay, so that means like what we talked about earlier. So if you did cast on 18, you would have to add stitches. If you cast it on or you can, so if you had 18 stitches before and that worked for you, you could knit 2 stitches together at the end and go down to the 16, or you could go add 2 more stitches and go up to the 18. The thing is they're all going to get seams in the back because they're going to be stitched together, either right butting up the edge, or you can have a little bit of a seam here holding on the inside of your work. So that part doesn't really matter. Or just start with a multiple of 4 to begin with and have a little bit wider width on your sweater And this is where that size is affected. So if you have more stitches, you're going to have a little bit more looseness. And this is a one size type thing, so I would just go up. Best discoveries or mistakes, Cheryl says, exactly. Let me take a drink here. Yes, on the loom, you're going back and forth. And on needles, you're going back and forth too. It's just that on needles, on the wrong side, you have to do the other stitch. So it depends on how you look at it, but either one has their own set of difficulties. Okay, so again, we're looking in these columns. So the back says, using the back layout chart as a stitch guide, complete the center 4 panels as follows. So this is the full back layout. Over on the key, you can see, sorry, excuse me. It says rows 1 through 3 are 14 centimeter by 14 centimeter. Row 4, see instructions for shaping. Basically these rows, so this is what they mean by row 1, 2, 3, or 4. They mean 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 is this top part. Basically it says they're going to be 12 centimeters. That's really what it is. So they're going to be a little bit shortened. Like I said, if you want more length, you can just add that. So the colors here are burnt orange, black, or you could do the navy, yellow, and then we have red, and then green, and then we have Jacquard, red, black. Okay, so they've made it, it looks like a K2 tog simple. Okay, so that's really how it is. Again, you can change it if you want to do different. Complete 3 14 centimeter sections of one of the center panels, and then work the 4th stitch section to measure 12 centimeters. There it is. And then cast off. It's also bind off, either one. Repeat for the 3 remaining center panels. Okay. So, left side panel, this one right here, this says complete 3 14 centimeter sections for left back panel, and then we have shape left back shoulder. Using burnt orange, work 10 centimeters in garter stitch, ending with the right side row, and then it tells you, whoa, so sorry, it tells you the shaping. So you'll have to look at that and see, but it says ending on a right side row. Well, you're ending after you've done an even row, an odd row, and then the next row, wrong side, it doesn't matter for loom knitters, you're just casting off the same number of stitches, cast off 9 stitches, and then knit to the end. Well, this would actually be purl to the end, and then because that's the garter stitch, and then the next row is knitting, and then you bind off or cast off the remaining stitches. And you can see that this was 18 stitches, so basically whatever your number is, if you did an even number, just cast off half and then cast off the other half. It's not as difficult as it would make it out to be. It's just, you're just doing half and then half. Right side panel complete. So they're just talking about the very left. See, this very left and this very right. Okay. And then right side panel, do the same thing, and then shape the right back shoulder using the green. You work 10 centimeters in that pattern and end after a row 1, and then do the same thing. You're just doing it opposite. Next row, cast off 9 stitches on the right side row, not the wrong side row. Cast off 9 stitches, work to pattern end. Sorry. And then work another row, and then you bind off. Okay, so, and then you go to left front, and then they give you this. So now you kind of know how to read that. I'm not going to go through everything, but it gives the layout here, and that's got the same kind of shaping for those things. It's just really repetitive, so I don't really want to show that. Shape left front neck, and then it gives some very specific things for shaping the neck. It's just basically working 2 stitches together and casting those off as needed. And if you need help with things like shaping, oh goodness gracious, you can go to my video on the sweater to help you with doing some of those shapings, and even for seaming, you can use that for seaming. This is the left front layout. So let's look at this. If you're like, what does left front layout mean? That's like when we're looking at this. Okay, so this is the front of the sweater, and I can tell because it has the button band here. They're talking about the, this is the left side. I know it's on the right, but this should be the left front panel. So let me see if that's right. So this will have yellow, green, and then Jacquard. So let's go down here. Nope. So this is actually on the left of the picture, but it's the right of the work. So this is green, red, and orange. So let me go back down. Green, red, orange. Look at that. So green, red, orange. Oh, that's right front. I'm sorry. Yeah, I looked at the wrong thing. Y'all probably picked up before I did. Anyway, it's right here. I kept passing it. Anyway, left front. So it's the part that fits on the person on the left side, not the left of your drawing. So it's just the same thing. You just start on the very bottom panel. You do this one first. And so this one would be Jacquard or Houndstooth. And then you do the yellow and the black and the green. And then set that panel aside. You work this one, green, Houndstooth or Jacquard, orange, red, and so on. That's how all of those work. So you do the panel like this. All right. And then right front panel is very similar, and they've got the layout for you. Keep going. And then the sleeves are similar as well. And you work these panels. You're still working for 3 panels instead of 4, and you're still working them like this. Okay. So you work 4 different panels of 3 squares. And then you move on to collar. Well, this remains up someplace. Yeah. Cheryl, I am going to push this at some point to YouTube. I'll probably, we'll probably have Joanne maybe push it on Friday next week. Joanne doesn't know that yet. We'll probably push this video to YouTube, so it'll be there, and then the next day is when we'll go live and put the video up. We might put it up earlier than that on YouTube. I don't know. So it'll go up on YouTube for reference, and that way you don't have to come back over to Facebook and see it. I mean, you can. I'm not going to take it down. Okay, collar. The collar is using the smaller needles, and what's funny is it says 4mm needles here, but I think it said 5 earlier. So let me go back. I think this was one of the ones I had notes on. No. Here it is. A pair of 4mm needles for the ribs. I think I missed that earlier. So you do need a smaller needle to do the ribs. Okay. The ribs are the edging down here at the bottom of the sweater, and also for the cuff and everything. Yeah. All right. Let's go back. Sorry for the back and forth. Oh, I've got this alarm that keeps coming up on me. Hold on. Stop. Okay. Collar. So you're going to use the smaller needles for the smaller yarn, and then you're going to cast on 119 stitches. And then you're going to work 18 centimeters in a knit 1, purl 1 rib. So you're just going to continue all that across knit 1, purl 1, and you're just going to line up on the second row. You're going to line up your knits with a knit column and a purls with a purl column. So loom knitters, you'll have to flip that. So the second row will be purl 1, knit 1, and then you're just going to cast off loosely for knitting, and then cut your yarn and leave a long tail. So that'll be the collar, and then if it's a little bit tighter, that's okay, because it'll just pull it in a little bit more. You can ease the fullness, and I've talked about that in the sweater pattern, where you might have to grab 2 stitches instead of 1, maybe because you have a little bit less space on that item. Again, this is a very kind of deconstructed loose patchwork cardigan. It's not perfect. It's okay if it's not perfect. In fact, it's better if it doesn't look perfect. All right, so then you have that piece, and you set that aside, and then leaving the long end for sewing. So just leave it really, really long. For sewing, I usually, if I'm going to sew, I want to make sure that the width of my, whatever I just did, like say I made the collar, you know, I made this collar, and I want to have a nice long piece. Whoops. I give it 2 to 3 times. 3 is best, and then you can have left over. That's fine. I'll give it 3 times the amount length of yarn here, and then cut off that tail so that I can easily sew it in and I don't run out. Because who wants to play yarn chicken when they're sewing in their pieces, right? So that's what I would do. And then the back rib, it gives you the cast on for that, and you're working a rib for 7 centimeters in a knit 2, purl 2 rib. So then you would purl 2, knit 2 rib on the knitting loom on the row returning, and then cast off loosely, and then cut your yarn, leave a long tail, and that's going to be sewn into the back. And we just talked about how long of a tail. Rib front, make 2, same thing. Same thing. It's 7 centimeters. So we're talking about these parts here. So we just talked about the collar. That's the collar. And then we talked about this ribbing here and this ribbing here. Okay. And down here. Now, you could make the back part the cast on and this front panel and this front panel ribbing all together. I would do that rather than have 3 separate pieces. That's just me. That way you don't have a line at the sides here. So what that means is the front rib and the back rib cast-ons need to be added together, but also this front rib has 2, so you would take 94 times 2 plus 182 stitches if you have the capability. That's all big loom. I'm just saying you could do that. So if you have several flexi looms, you could add it. But I would use, if you're like, what am I doing? So I talked about the needle size and I talked about this loom, but Kristen, you didn't talk about the other. And I don't know, someone may have made that comment, but you can use the small one. Let me get the skinny one. This is the chunky from KB Looms. And you would want to get this one. So you can use the skinny one to make your ribbing with the thinner yarn. So when you have your Aran weight yarn or your worsted weight yarn, use that. Okay? And then use this one with the chunky weight. I mean the super bulky weight yarn. Does that make sense? Okay. I gotta get some more water. This is a lot of talking. Okay. And then, okay, this is really interesting. So look what they've done here. It's kind of cool. So it's a picture, an actual photo of the sweater, and you can see what I mean by the deconstructed, reconstructed. Look, I'm trying to zoom in here. But look, when they stitched on this ribbing, they literally put it on with a crochet hook and let the red come up above the line here. Do you see that? Okay, it would not be my choice to do that, but if you want to do it because you're a diehard fan and you want to do it just the way they did it, then that's what you do. But see these little squares here? They're showing you their key that they used on all those other diagrams, which is pretty clever. And then see these little pieces here that are sticking out? That's those small tassels. That's your scrap yarn. It's the tattered look. Oh, thank you. That's the word I was searching for, Cheryl. Absolutely. Yes. So it's my great grandma's quilt with the little pieces, and you're basically just tying a square knot right at the ends there. And then of course you would want to like cut them shorter because, you know, my tails tend to be super long. But you can do your normal thing if you want to and not do that. All right. Buttonhole band. Sorry, I have my VIP meeting coming up and I'm just keep snoozing it. Okay, and then the buttonhole band is this blue part here. And it says using 5.5mm needles. Again, I would just go ahead and use the skinny and blue, cast on 6 stitches, and then it says row 1 in every right side row, knit 5, purl 1, and then row 2 you're going to do the opposite for the loom. It's purl 1 below twice, and then knit 2. So again, you have to set it up on the right side row, and then it says make buttonhole, where you knit 2 and then you knit 2 together and bring the yarn forward, and but the yarn forward you don't really have to worry about on the loom. And then it says purl 1 below, and then you would purl 1 here. So let me say that again for looms. Okay, so the buttonhole is, because this is a wrong side row, you're going to purl 2 together, purl 1 below, and if you didn't set it up right, you can always like pull the yarn from the back and kind of unknit that one, and then purl 1 below, and then purl 1. Here's the thing, you could just do this in garter stitch, and then when you get to that row 4, just make a buttonhole by knitting 2. Okay, knitting 2 together. That's what I would do. And then row 6, it says you're doing the opposite there too. You're purling 1, purl 1 below twice, and knit 2. Okay, do we have our UK people here? I don't know, I may have lost any UK people I had, but NB, I don't know what NB means. Does anybody know what that means? So NB, for second, knit 1 below, which is purl 1 below for loom knitters. Needle is inserted into buttonhole space. Yeah. And then anyway, and you repeat this twice. This is a little convoluted, and I'll have to figure out what this one is, and I may need to figure this out for you guys and do it again. But honestly, it's such a deconstructed piece. You could just knit 1 together and place where you want, or knit 2 together and place where you want the buttons, and then work to the next part. So you could even sew toggles on and just have a toggle that pops on through, or make it one that you don't actually do any buttonholes and don't actually sew it together, because a lot of people just wear it open, and they could just be surface sewn buttons that are spread out that don't actually get used. So that's also a thing. Repeat rows 7 through 11 until 9 centimeters have been worked. So you can go through this. I'm not going to really go through it, but I do want to point out this great picture of the type of construction that they're doing. So if you notice this vertical seam, I know it's hard to not notice that, but if you notice this part here, this vertical part, this you can't see the seam. So there's a seam sewn in the back. And then here, the seam that they're doing to join these two is right here. But you can't convince me that you need that, because to me, this part is not really fully attached to this part. I think it actually needs to be sewn together first, and then they're adding that part for flavor. Does that make sense? Like, to me, this is together too well to be just connected right here. Does that make sense? So my suggestion is sew it as you would normally, where it hides everything. And if you want these little accents, you can place them on there if you want, because it's really not in many other places. Okay, the button band, and it goes into the button band. Here it is. It just looks, honestly, I would, like I said, I would just do garter stitch, because that's really what it looks like. It doesn't actually give it much of a difference, and a garter stitch band or a seed stitch would be just fine. So, all right, so the next part is, it says to make up. Join panels using the red Aran yarn to sew. So the thinner red yarn that they talked about in the beginning, that's just for sewing these panels. Lay the panels in order, pull all tail ends to right side of work. Do not darn with the right sides together, and match the stitch sections. Pin 2 panels. Sew a narrow back stitch seam, and join the rest of the panels the same way. With the ribs, sew the wrong sides together. pin, you just pin them. So that's why I was saying, so it actually says that they sewed it together. NB, this part, don't know. The seam will be on the outside. So that's that part they were talking about where they're using the crochet hook and repeat on the front, the other parts. So attach the front bands. This is just going all into it. I don't really want to go through it, but you guys can figure that all that out. But you can use my videos for sewing the seams together. But I did want to point out here's an area where you have an off color here. If you don't want this color joined where it blips through like that, always start on a new row in a knit row, or you'll get little colors blip through. So when you join on the right side row, which is every row on Loom, you want to make sure your color joins are always on a knit row, okay? Otherwise it does that. And then make tassels is that thing I was talking about before where they're all tied, and you can see them here. And then insert the sleeves. You're just inserting the sleeves going in around. What else? There's not really much to say. This person compiled it, Ruth Herring. I'm not sure if she actually works at JW Anderson or not, but she is on Instagram at confessions_of_a_yarnaholic. So you could probably get more information from her. But you can see how this is a very different type of patchwork sweater that you can really, or cardigan, that you can really just make your own. So anyway, I knew you'd find out what that NB means. Wait, where was the NB? Did someone say that? Yeah, okay, now I'm going back to find out where that was. NB. Now I want to know. I didn't figure out what it was, but it's not in the abbreviations. So see, look, just to prove my point, it's not here. It's not in the abbreviations. But it says it, the first part is where it says it right here that I've seen. Right there. So, anyhow. So that was it. So let me know if you guys have further questions. I don't really know how else I could answer them, but just to show you again, so you have this houndstooth, which comes out tomorrow for the knitting loom, and then what is also on here is the garter stitch, and then you have the jersey slip stitch, which of course I didn't have enough rows with the slip, and then we have the seed stitch here, and then we have the double moss stitch here, which I do not have finished yet. You can learn how to pull 3 strands from one ball, and then the glorious reverse B stitch, which is beautiful. This would just be very pretty. So and then honestly I just love the reverse on this. Here we go. I've got it upside down. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? Love it. Oh, note. Found a possible meaning. Carol said NB means note. That makes much more sense than the abbreviation I found. Oh, okay. NB is note. I don't know why that would be note, but cool. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate your patience in going through this pattern. I know it was pretty long today, but I hope it helps someone who is trying to loom knit this, because loom knitters should not be left out. And I will catch you next time when I talk about this for needle knitters and crocheters on YouTube live at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. And not sure if we figured out that date, but it'll be on a Saturday coming up soon. So we'll see you soon. Have a great day. Happy knitting and crochet and loom knitting. Bye, everyone.